Friends, today is a bit of an unusual day today. We don't have just one new car that has turned up on our doorstep, or even two new cars that have turned up on our doorstep. We actually have 4 new cars that have turned up on our doorstep. We are in beautiful, lovely Portland, Oregon, driving the new Lexus RX, and there's actually 4 of them. There is the RX350, the gas model. There is the RX450h, the hybrid model. Then there is an F-Sport derivation of the gas model, and for the first time ever, there is an F-Sport derivation of the hybrid model. So we're actually working on not one, but 2 separate episodes. One for the 350s, both the F-Sport and the base, and one for the 450s, the F-Sport and the base, which will come out next week. So while we're working on those full episodes, let's go over some of the highlights of both cars. If you're very astute here, you notice these are both hybrid, so this is going to be the stand-in for the 350, and this is going to be the F-Sport hybrid, which it actually is. So let's start with the things that get us most excited, which is the engine here. Come on over. And there's some details here I'm going to share with you. Now think of this as a 350, so forget about this Lexus hybrid drive here for a minute. The 350, it's a 3.5 liter V6, 295 horsepower, 267 pound-feet of torque. But what's interesting here is not so much the numbers, it's really how the engine is attached to the car. We're going to cover that in the full episode. This was an unusual trip in that we not only got to have dinner with the chief engineer of the car, we got to have dinner with the guy who runs the manufacturing facility in Canada that constructs all of these vehicles for the Americas. And we found out something very interesting in the way they do the subframe and attach the engine to both the subframe and the unibody. Very unique for something in this segment, especially when we spend some time in manufacturing facilities over the years. Now, there is the Lexus hybrid system. It's still a 3.5 liter V6. The power is down a bit. It's 259 horsepower. The torque, now that's interesting here. Lexus does not quote the total system torque on this thing. Basically what they do is they quote the total system power, which is 308 horsepower in the Lexus hybrid version, so the 450h version. We're going to spend more time going over both engines and something unique about this engine in the full episode, so make sure you come back for the full episode on this one. Now, while we close the hood here, I want to talk about something I normally don't talk about. Like, I never try to talk about something you guys can see, like design. You either like this design or you don't like this design. But in one of the full episodes, we are going to talk about the story of how this thing came about. But I'm going to give you a bit of a preview here on it. You know how Akira Toyoda, he kind of came in and he did a bit of a mea culpa. He said, look, you know, we need to make Toyotas and Lexus more aggressive, basically make them appeal to younger buyers. So this is a very graphic example of it, and I don't just mean the lines, I mean in the way the story, the backstory of how this design came about. And that's something we're going to cover in the full episode for the 350. Now, while we're talking about design here, let's take a look at the interior. And this is something I am going to expand on a little bit here. Now, we spent some time talking about, the IS, we've talked about the RCF, and we've also talked about some of the details of each. And I'm like one of the few people that really loves the interior of these things. I feel like Lexus, forget about the whole concept that they're trying to get more aggressive and they're trying to get people, frankly, like me to buy cars like this. It's, you know, I'm one of those people that was very young when Lexus was just coming into being, when Lexus was a new brand, and it was a new brand that was accepted very quickly by most people who bought luxury cars. And now they're more of a mature brand, so they have to do something different. And the thing they've done different here is to make their designs on the interior a departure from what you get from, say, Germany or England or even America. And here, look at the angular design. It picks up the same design theme that you get from the IS and the RCF, but notice in this one it's a lot more mature, because think about the buyer of these things. They're going to be yummy mommies, people with families, or even empty nesters who are a little bit older. So that's why I think there's more maturity in the design. But notice it's more upright here. And then one thing we're going to spend some time talking about in the full episode is the trim here. Like, if you notice this wood here, It's not just that it's gray, it has aluminum trim bits in here, and this is real wood and real aluminum. But what's particularly interesting is who manufactures it. So if you are piano aficionados, you know how Yamaha has been making pianos since the beginning of time. Well, it's Yamaha that's actually doing the construction of the wood for all of the RXs, and there are 5 different trim levels, I shouldn't say trim levels, but 5 different trims available for the interior. Very nice touch, and that's in addition to the contrast stitching that's in here. And there's some other details that they've added to the RX that are not in other Lexus. Like, you got the length of the seat that's available. That's only available in the LS right now, and that adjusts the length of the seat like on a track, in addition to the movement forward and backward, where this actually moves this thigh support more forward, so it increases the length of the seat, not just gives you more thigh support. And while we're talking about seats, come on back here. This is a 2-row crossover. So this is a segment that was started back in 1998, well before there were other crossovers out there. This was the first one that kind of invented the segment. So power fold seats hasn't been a big deal here. Mainly power fold seats are for 3 rows, and you can see why, because it's a pain in the ass to get back here. Well, this is kind of the first time that they're actually doing power fold seats in a 2nd row in a 2-row crossover. Nice little touch. I don't know if we're going to hit the screen, which is bigger this year. Oh wow, we just made it. So anyway, there are 3 buttons, 3 places you can do this. There's here, there's one back here, and then there's a button that the driver can control for the fold-down seat. And while we're talking about seats, let's move over to the F-Sport model. So if you are a Lexus aficionado, you know a couple things about F-Sport. There's different wheels, different aero mods, some trim pieces, like notice this black mirror housing here, and then there's a grille change. You got the spindle grille like you have on all of them now, but it gives you this mesh type look here, which I'll admit I'm not a huge fan of the whole spindle thing here, but the way it works on an F is, I think, a little bit more presentable than it is on just the regular models. Now this one we're looking at here has a special lighting package on it, so they're not only steerable lights, but it gives you cornering lights as well down here, and that's optional on both, whether it's the base car or the F-Sport. But let's get back to one of the biggest things about the F-Sport that I personally find the biggest difference about, and that's the seats here. So notice the seat. It's very different than the seat that's over there. That one was kind of flat. There isn't any support. This one has so basically lateral support, both in the seat bottom and on the seat back. But it's not just built-in or built-up bolsters on either side. What they've done is the actual seat cushion, it's injection molded, so it's a much stiffer seat cushion. So think back to like the golden days of Mercedes-Benz, like the 70s. If you ever sit in like an old school Mercedes, matter of fact, people who live in Portland, they got a ton of these old diesel Mercedes going around here. I love how everybody keeps them alive, and they run biodiesel them, and this is the place to do it. Anyway, the seats that are in those, very stiff for a reason. The whole logic of having a stiff seat is to reduce fatigue. So what Lexus has done here is actually borrowed a trick out of the Mercedes playbook from like 40 years ago and applied it here, but the manufacturing process is very different because it's injection molding, not like horsehair with springs that are holding up the seat. That's effectively what they did way back in the 70s. And then while we're on this, actually I want to show you one other detail. Notice the sunroof in this one here. There's a traditional small sunroof in this one here, and then if you come over here, notice this one here. This is like the full-on panoramic sunroof. Actually, this one does not have a panoramic sunroof. Oh, no, it does. It's not open. So there's a panoramic sunroof that you can get in either one. So it's basically a choice. You want a small or large sunroof, kind of like going to McDonald's. Very strange when you consider a car like this. Then there's another touch here, this floating roofline. Now I know you and I have spent a lot of time talking about this from Shiro Nakamura over at Nissan. He's done it on the Murano first, then he did it on the Maxima. This is the first time I've seen it on a car that is not Nissan. You and I are going to have to talk about this in one of the full episodes. Now let's step back a little bit here. Notice again the design here on this F-Sport. Take a look at how the C-pillar kind of ends into the backlight, but notice it almost looks like there's a trunk here. That's a huge departure for Lexus, and very frankly, that's one of the more angular departures of design. Like if you look at the way the line goes all the way to the front, it's not an unbroken line. The line comes around from here and then picks up again here, but only goes down, basically bows out here, but then picks up, goes all the way to the hood, and then another line picks up here and then goes all the way to the fender. This is, I think the best way to describe it is tessellated. Like you guys, when we worked with Derek over at Mazda and we built those 4 Mazda SEMA show cars, we did a very similar graphic. It wasn't a line, it was a graphic on a CX-5, and that had a cool look. And here's the first time we're actually seeing it from a manufacturer. Then there's one other thing I want to show you here, and that is back into this car here. Notice the size of the screen. It is, get this, 12.3 inches. It looks like, imagine a phablet, but one that is very, very, very tall put on its side. And what's interesting about this is it's not just a very big screen and then there's only like a small amount of the real estate that's used. The actual map in this thing, it's full 16:9 in that 12.3 screen. So the map goes all the way the width of the screen. Very cool. It doesn't go to the edge, which I'd love to see the bleeding edge, but it's a much, like we talked about this in the NX episode. If you guys haven't seen that NX episode, you need to check it out because that car was kind of a surprise to me. I didn't realize how good that would be. It's such a departure from the RAV4 and kind of picks up on this design language here. Now with that, I think that's about everything we're going to cover here on the 2 RXs before we give you our full episodes. So once again, housekeeping, there's going to be one episode on the 350, the gas model. It's going to cover the 350 and the F Sport. And there's going to be another episode on the hybrid model, which is going to be covering the 450 and the 450 F Sport. That's going to come next week. And with that, I want to leave you guys with a question. Now, these guys, they invented this segment in 1998. And to give you an idea, they have sold 2.1 million of these since 1998. That is a humongous number when you consider the price point of what this car is. To give you an idea of perspective, like I want to say Toyota sells maybe 400,000 units a year of the Camry, and that's less than half the price of this car. So usually when you double the price, when you get into $40,000 and above, it usually halves volumes. This is not the case. The volumes still stay very high. Now we're going to cover that segment, kind of this data in one of the full episodes, but I want to leave you with this question. What other car above $40,000 in price point, actually let's say above $30,000 in price point, sells the same kind of volumes? It's a luxury car, well maybe not a luxury car, maybe a sports sedan, how about that? What other car sells these kind of volumes? Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And until next week, when we start with the 350, and this has been our stand-in 350, and then move on to the 450, I will see you guys. And oh, by the way, have a great Labor Day weekend.